Hello everybody, look at what I got in front of me today. This is the PowerA Fusion wired Fightpad. This controller works on the PS4, but it'll also work on PC as well. And this is pretty cool. It comes with 3 different faceplates. Alright, let's start with the build quality. This is really high quality. There's not a lot of flex or anything. It just feels really solid in the hand. And I think it looks cool. It kind of looks like a boomerang, you know what I mean? I really like the curves of the controller here. It just feels really comfortable in the hands. I feel like the plastic's pretty high quality. You can take off the faceplates here and replace it. It's all magnetic. Here's the USB cable. It's 10 feet long, micro USB. There's a couple of things that's cool about this cable. You've got a breakaway here. This is something that the original Xbox controllers do. Always been a fan of it. And on this end where you plug this into the controller, you can see there's a lock. Put it in here, so you can't yank it out unless you press these 2 to release it. And they're pretty hard. And I like this solution a lot. This is way better and compact than this big old thing on the DualSense Edge. Look how clunky and weird looking this is. Yeah, just do this instead. This makes so much more sense. Right below the home button here, you can switch the D-pad from D-pad to left stick or right stick. There we go. What do you say we plug this in? And let's talk about whether it's good or not for fighting games. Let's start with the face buttons. As you can see here, this is a 6-button layout. The buttons themselves are bigger than your normal typical controller. You can see how much bigger these are compared to the DualSense. And I think the layout is just perfect. They're close enough together where you can press 2 buttons at once. A lot of controllers, the handles are really long, so when you play claw, it's really difficult. This thing is gonna hit your palm, but here, there's room. You can easily go back and forth without the handle hitting your palm. They're pretty clicky. However, they do feel heavy. And I think this is because the buttons are bigger, so the rubber dome base switches underneath here are also bigger. So you're gonna need to exert a little bit more pressure to press on these things. They do seem to spring up pretty quickly though. Alright, before we get onto the triggers and the shoulder buttons, there's a little switch here. These are to control what the shoulder and the trigger buttons do. So for example, right now, this is going to be your normal left trigger, left shoulder button, right shoulder button. But then when you switch it over here, this guy becomes the left thumbstick click, and this guy becomes the right thumbstick click. The right trigger and shoulder buttons become left trigger and shoulder buttons, and you can use these for right trigger and right shoulder buttons. If you need to access the thumbstick clicks, switch it over here. Let's move on to the shoulder buttons and the triggers. Let's start with the triggers. These guys, they actually feel like triggers. They have a lot of travel actually. It still feels like a button, but there's a lot of travel to it. And also because the way that it's shaped, it also kind of feels like a trigger as well. Just a really short travel trigger or a long travel button. Overall, I like them a lot. They're easy to press, easily accessible. Alright, let's get to these shoulder buttons. From looking at it, they look pretty normal, right? They're on the top here. You can click it in from both sides. Nothing unusual. However, when you get into the matches, you're gonna notice that you accidentally press this button all the time. And if you play a character like Zangief here in Street Fighter 6, he has a lot of full circular motions like this. When you do a circular motion, your left index finger is going to naturally rest on the side of the handles here for leverage. As you rotate your thumb around, your knuckle is going to press against it for leverage, right? So you can go like this. And as you can see here, the shoulder button curves down quite a bit onto the side of the handle. So when I do it, he's going to do that. Really, the only way to get around this is to make sure that your index finger is lifted up while you rotate your thumb around the D-pad. and that's just not natural to me, and I just can't get that leverage I need to rotate this thing around quickly. In the heat of battle, you're gonna squeeze this thing like crazy, so I end up having to disable this button altogether in the game, and what that means is you're gonna lose one button, and that really is a shame. I mean, do they even test this guy out? If you have adult hands, you're gonna accidentally hit this guy all the time. There's just no way around it. If you look at something like the Wolverine Pro 2 here, there's a little bit of a gap here between the handle and the shoulder button, and the reason for that is so that there's room so that you don't accidentally press the shoulder button when you're trying to squeeze the D-pad when you do circular motions. But on here, not only don't you have that gap, but it falls down pretty steep onto the side. Who thought that was a good idea? This thing needs to be moved this way over here, or have a little bit of a gap. And I get it, they're going for aesthetics. It just looks really nice and curvy, but really, you don't buy controllers for looks. You buy controllers because they work well, especially for Fightpad. I cannot believe that they missed this during testing, or maybe they didn't test it at all. Alright, let's move on to the D-pad. It's a floating D-pad, so it's kind of like a joystick, kind of like a flat joystick if you will. There's a lot of travel in all directions. It's great for motion inputs. Very responsive, great for 2D fighters. Now the problem though is when you're going to run into moves that you're going to have to do 2 full circles to execute. And because of the nature of a floating D-pad, it's slower when you slide your thumb around versus something like this where it's a disc and there's not a lot of travel here. With this guy I can go like this really quickly, but with this D-pad and the raised edges here on the cross really slow you down. Well, the solution would be just rotate it, but even this, because the travel is so deep, you gotta really get in there, and this also slows you down. There's no way you can do this quick enough. I cannot execute the Bolshoi Storm Bust third throw consistently with this. Sometimes I get lucky and I get it, but most of the time I just get the regular throw. Other than that though, all of the other motion inputs work great on this controller. You see how the D-pad is in the middle of this caved in area. It looks cool, right? It looks like a little egg and the D-pad's in the middle. However, this area of the D-pad from down to forward, there's not a lot of room here. When you do a quarter circle forward, the side of your thumb is going to constantly rub against this wall of this little hole right here, this little caved in area. And I'm the type of player that will slide my thumb around the edges of the D-pad so that I can feel my way around. In the beginning, this drove me nuts. Did you see that? I can't really dig my hand in there. And I tried to take this guy off and play like this. Unfortunately though, the problem still exists. It's a little bit better, but the faceplate itself is really thin. So you have only a tiny bit more room to work with. So it didn't really help much, and it just looks horrible like this. Again, just like this left shoulder button, any type of testing at all, you would have noticed that right away. They either needed to carve this thing out more or not have this caved in area at all and raised the D-pad up. Something like this where the D-pad is above the faceplate. Anytime when I see a design like this where the D-pad is placed in the middle of a caved in area, it's a bad sign, and sure enough, not good. The good news though is I did get used to it over time and I'm still able to execute my moves no problem. It's just that on the other side of your thumb it's gonna get rubbed against this wall right here all the time, and it's super annoying. In terms of cardinal directions, they're pretty good for the most part. Left, right, up and down is pretty accurate as long as you press on the raised edges here. Due to the nature of a floating D-pad, it's a pretty loose D-pad. At first you're probably gonna struggle with the diagonals. Just make sure your thumb is right in between the directions. After getting used to it, diagonals are not a problem for me. Because it is a floating D-pad, I can do the Korean backdash really fast. I just slide down and left repeatedly. I don't have to go all the way up here. That way I can back up hella quick. I love it. Double taps work well. However, it's not the fastest just because there's a lot of travel. You gotta press it down, wait for it to go back up, and then press it again. Something like this is a lot quicker just because there's not a lot of travel. I can do all of my combos, no problem. Overall, I think this is a great D-pad. The only issue is this side right here. It's just too close to the D-pad. Alrighty, final thoughts on this controller. I'm a little torn. On one hand, I really do like this controller. I like the shape of it. I like the way that it feels in the hand. It feels good. It feels premium. The face buttons are great. The D-pad is good, except for this little area here, but you can get used to that. So hopefully for the next one, they'll fix the shoulder buttons, fix this thing over here, and there's just simple fixes. It's not hard. And then you're gonna have a great Fightpad. Alrighty, that's gonna be it for me. Hopefully you found that to be helpful. If you did, give the video a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.